Ora bem, como prometido, vamos começar a fazer os resumos do que é que se passou na COMPUTEX, desta vez por malta que fez os vídeos lá diretamente, tanto youtubers muito conhecidos, já falei aqui quais são, ou então pelo próprio fabricante, mas acho que vamos ficar pelo malta que faz os reviews, porque conseguimos mostrar muita coisa, ok? Neste resumo vai estar aqui o Tibauer, ok? Que é o dono da Thermal Grizzly, e vamos também falar diretamente com o Thermal Grizzly, que acho que tem um setor também só com eles. Vídeos também com o Gamers Nexus e com o Hardware Unbox. E o Kit Guru Tech também é uma pessoa muito conhecida, ok? Mas acho que estamos mais ou menos conversados. Vamos então aqui colocar os vídeos. Já sabem aqui o nosso amigo que vamos falar aqui. E vamos pôr aqui o segundo vídeo. Ok, já está.
Hey everyone, so we're at COMPUTEX 2025 and I am with Derek.
Ora, cá está o nosso amigo da Gamers Nexus. Aqui é o Debauer, ou o nome dele verdadeiro, Roman Hartung, ele é alemão. É o proprietário da Thermal Grizzly e ele vai aqui mostrar umas coisas engraçadas.
And Roman, last we met with you was actually at your factory, which is pretty cool. Now you have a bunch of stuff you're showing off for Thermal Grizzly.
Vejam depois o vídeo aqui,
the quick run through
que
of
acho
it
que é
before we get
muito
into
importante.
details is
Coisas que ele trouxe
He's got
COMPUTEX.
their bench table.
São duas coisas muito interessantes. Esta, por exemplo, já que há uns tempos atrás se tinha visto, é um kit para as placas gráficas, para as séries 5000, neste caso é para a 590, que é um kit fabuloso de refrigeração de água. Pá, fabuloso.
Grizzly, so getting some of the manufacturing detail. The microfins here are also pretty interesting, very tightly spaced together. And then a Rubik's Cube that doesn't spin, but I've already put in the request for COMPUTEX 2026, and I am assured that it will be done. Right? We've got to commit. Before that, this video is brought to you by the Thermal Take.
Vou passar para a frente porque isto é publicidade. Vejam depois diretamente no canal dele. Este, por exemplo, é outra coisa espetacular que o Debauer tem na Thermal Grizzly.
Is going on here.
So we have the WireView Pro 2.
Yeah.
Thanks to NVIDIA.
Yeah.
Thanns for giving us unlimited business ideas. Always
realmente, graças à NVIDIA, não é? So, faz as cagadas e eles têm que
Elmore had
preparar.
his PMD for power tracking, and I thought it would be cool to have something like this.
Não, este terminal está muito engraçado. Dá a informação da potência que está a passar ali, portanto, ou seja, que vocês estão a consumir.
No, it's a nice connector.
Okay, yeah. You got per pen current, this is maybe voltage, or what is this display? Okay.
Or we could configure it to like power as well. This is like really early prototyping stage.
So the thing I want to point out right away, we've been talking about this stuff already, but basically this, if you don't know the WireView, it sits between the GPU and the power cable from the power supply, and it can track the power. But the interesting thing now is you're also doing data logging.
Yeah.
So you said around 3 months of data?
Yeah, we didn't set the interval yet, but we're thinking about maybe like 5 seconds.
Tem também eles têm então um conector mais simples do que este. Este já é mais avançado.
Temperature, so everything that the device is tracking into the storage of it. Because
nem a NVIDIA consegue fazer em uma empresa
que é
0.00001 de uma NVIDIA consegue fazer.
There are multiple. So you have temperature sensors on the connectors, and then you have additional ones on the bottom. Two you can plug in, and you could hook up to, I don't know,
já anda há uns anos no mercado informático.
Like 10K.
Ele também adora carros, tem cada carrão.
So, for the logging,
vídeos mesmo dele, por exemplo, em Nürburgring, com os carros. Enfim, é malta com os troquitos.
For voltage, I guess. So, like, if you start seeing a creep up in current, or maybe it could point you towards a resistance issue or something.
Ele aqui a vestir a camisola da firma dele, né, que é a Thermal Grizzly.
The thing is, you know, obviously,
faz talvez dos melhores pastas térmicas para o consumidor.
Figure out, or the customer would figure out something is wrong before it fails. But we don't really know if that's the case. There could still be that the current is maybe a bit higher, but there could be just a point of contact resistance
Right.
that is a bit higher and then causes
Vou
more.
pôr isto mais rápido,
We don't
que é
know,
para
it's
vocês não perderem
speculation,
muito tempo.
but what
Pois,
we're hoping to figure out is that if
aconselho a
it goes,
verem
we
o
can
vídeo,
figure out what's
que é
going
sempre
on,
bom.
and then maybe draw
É uma maneira de
Is
dar
this unfailable?
feedback.
Okay, so let's get into that. So, this is one of the things where one of the problems we had with some of the marketing claims that some cable companies were making previously in the early days of 12 volt high power was related to
E acho que temos outro vídeo da terminal Odysee aqui.
where my feeling on the
sim.
connector at this point,
Aí é só mesmo.
after we did the research piece a while ago, is that I personally would, if I were a manufacturer, I would not ever feel comfortable saying this will not fail if it has the connector
Well,
on
the
it.
question is how fast does it fail?
And how many, right?
Yeah.
So what, do you have any numbers from like prior wire views?
So I checked that for the wire views that we sold so far that use 12 volt high power connectors on the GPU side. So we have multiple different versions. Also, for example, one that has triple 8-pin input and then a single 12 volt high power output, like an adapter. And from when we started selling it, it's about 3,700 units.
Okay.
And we had 12 confirmed cases of melted connectors.
I can't do that math in my head that quickly.
So that's about 0.3%.
Okay. The fan, it looks like, what is it, 40 mil? Or what is it, or small?
It's a 30 millimeter.
30 millimeter.
Yeah.
So just a 30 millimeter fan, you're pulling in through the top.
Eu acho que este conector é um bocado grande, pá, eu não sei. Eu gostava de ver a imagem dele colocado dentro de um PC,
So
em
it's
cima da
blowing directly on
gráfica.
the back of the connector, but it's also dissipating heat from the PCB and from the case.
E este já é
itself,
diferente.
because we have through all the circuitry that's on it, the shunt resistors, and you have two connectors, so you have 24 points of contact resistance.
Yeah.
So that can easily add up to, I don't know, 5 to 10 watts of heat.
Okay.
And the fan would help
Get
just
it out of
dissipating
case.
that heat, even if it's like the normal operating state. Especially if you use this
Visto,
on a
parece
wall
que ela também
you have
faz
low
redução do
effluence in your
calor
system,
dos
5 to 10
conectores.
watts on such a small surface that it would heat it up quite a lot.
Okay.
And that's what we already experience on the current wire views with, let's say, a 5090.
Yeah.
So we had to account for that. And we're obviously hoping that if there is a current imbalance, then maybe the fan can help a little bit to mitigate the risk of it immediately failing.
What about fail safes? So, because we've
That's also interesting, yeah.
So what's the story with those?
There's a small 2-pin connector in the bottom right here. And so like right
Okay,
here
yeah.
next to the USB-C.
Peça tão
And
pequenina
this
com
2-pin connector, you
tantos
would get a
conectores
Y
ali.
splitter cable, and you can hook this up to the mainboard power button.
Okay.
And then we plan to
So
define.
basically, you plug in the switch, the button
Yeah.
switch, and then this
Yeah.
into the splitter, and so then whichever one's being used will just.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it could trigger the system to shut down.
I think the most valuable
Yeah.
thing for the public would be just the data from failures. Like, really, what you need is failures.
Esta acho que isto ainda estava ainda em
Which is
fase
not something I would normally say to a company selling a product.
testes, acho eu.
Like, so here's the plan, all right? You're Der Bauer right now, you're not Thermal Grizzly. So as Der Bauer, the best thing that can happen is that you have some failures, because now I understand what he's doing now. The business strategy is clear. You've created an infinite content loop where
You see where
first
I'm
you
going,
sell the
yeah.
product,
Yeah.
and then you can collect data
Yeah.
from failures
Yeah.
that presumably are not your fault and are related to the connector. Then you can use that to create videos, and then you can use that to create more products. It's brilliant. All right.
É,
Thanks. And it's all only thanks to NVIDIA. So
é no vídeo é que fez isto.
So,
Criar
sure go watch.
é como os drivers.
sure he's
Ah,
watching
agora os
right now.
drivers da NVIDIA são feitos
Just
para
your name
inteligência
and my name on
artificial.
blacklist
Yeah, yeah.
for GPU samples.
also, you mean we can't go to the keynotes anymore?
Oh, they definitely don't want me there.
Too bad.
Yeah. All right. Anything else on this that we need to know about?
I mean, there's also a USB-C which will hook it up to your system. You can monitor over software. You
Yeah.
can configure stuff over the software, and
You can write to the device. right?
Yes, you can write to it, and there should be space to also put some images on it if you want to.
Can you just uninstall the software after?
Yep.
Okay, cool.
That's
Perfect.
exactly the
That's all
point.
I want. Price, release date?
Parece.
Release date, let's say probably end of the year.
You skipped the first one.
Yeah,
Price?
Está em fase de testes.
I guess around 100.
Okay.
Because the problem is that on this one,
Let's
you
say
might have
euros.
recognized the MSI connector
Yeah.
that we just repurposed, but
Yeah.
we need one that is
É,
going
isto
to
tem
be
que ser uma
longer
peça
for reliability reasons.
com
So
muita
we need to
confiança.
make our own connector, which is really expensive and
Yeah.
high MOQ, which means that we have to invest quite a lot of money into this.
Minimum order quantity for people. So
Yeah.
they have to custom mold something?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the lead time is quite long. That's the main part. It will take us 3 months to just get the connector.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it. What's the impact to pricing from just a custom connector? I mean, how much does that really move? Versus, because there's a lot going on here, like PCB and
Yeah.
everything else. So how much is the connector contributing?
I think it's aside from the case, it's the most expensive single part.
Okay.
Yeah, because the rest, even the ICs on there are not that expensive, but the custom connector, the connector itself is not that expensive, but if you take the mold into account, which is
É, mas é uma pessoa muito honesta.
then Yeah, it adds up.
Right.
Yeah.
Vendo
last two
o
things,
Gamas
you
Next
said
falando
32
com
megabytes
asas,
of
vendo
storage.
a falar com a
either
Rock,
16 or
que eles só
32.
dão
And then
respostas
the
pré-feitas.
case, you
É
could
isso
make
não.
it at thermal because they have the factory we went to. Do you think you will?
Yeah, we will probably make the initial batch, but I'm afraid that we might not have the capacity
To keep up.
So if we make, I don't know, maybe 2,000 units initially, we might not be.
Ah,
fast
vai ser
enough,
muito
and we
restrito.
might
Isso
Also,
é.
as a part of it.
Yeah. All right, let's do this one.
Yeah.
So their bench table, we saw.
Essa é outra. Eu tenho duas. Tens bem. Não, duas não, três. Três.
I guess cool.
Tem três, mas não dele, não é?
For years, if you check on my channel, my bench table is an empty PCB with a couple of standoffs on it.
Mas eu gostei de ver aquela outra caixa que aparece num dos vídeos que eu apresentei.
I never found it useful.
Dá para
And at a certain
fazer
point,
disto.
I was thinking about
Só
why
que é muito
did I
mais
not
cara.
use an actual PCB that can contribute something to it.
Right.
So I was brainstorming with Elmore, and then he said it's an amazing idea to add RGB underneath.
Okay, got it.
So
Yeah.
he was really happy about that part.
Yeah.
And then we were thinking about what could we actually make useful.
So is this just a giant diffuser around the edge
Yeah.
here? Okay.
So, yeah, that's also how it kind of evolved. So we originally just wanted to make a PCB and standoffs, and that's it.
We should probably
Yeah.
take a step back too. And what does it actually do? For
All right.
So I mean, obviously you put the motherboard on top of the standoffs
Yep.
here. These just unscrew and then hold it, like
Yep.
secure the board. So it's a test platform.
Yep.
But you've got a bunch of stuff coming out of it. So walk me through the different types of connections.
Yeah, so we call it like an active bench table. So we have different zones and
Acho que
different
no outro
purposes.
vídeo
The main purpose
aparece,
for me
aparece este,
is this connector, which is just
esta peça.
internal USB connection to the motherboard above. So you would have a wire that goes directly onto the motherboard. And this connects the USB connectors right
Okay.
here. So the 2.0 for two here
connectors, yeah.
and two on here. So for me personally, that's just where I would hook up like keyboard and mouse, for example.
it.
And then also 4 micro SD cards. Micro SD because mainly it's extremely cheap. So you can get like 64 gigabyte for €5.
Yeah.
And then I would have one where you have like your Windows image and
Micro
like BIOS and
SDs.
drivers and all that. And I would,
Sure.
I plug it in, I immediately have everything I need every single time I'm swapping the platform. So that's the main point.
So I think I working in a basically lab environment.
Yeah.
I understand why for this stuff. I think the immediate question if I'm a viewer is like, why would I plug a keyboard and mouse into this when I can plug the keyboard and mouse into basically the back of the I/O, right, for the motherboard? The answer I come to is because I'm changing the board constantly. Okay.
Yeah, because you know how it is with testing. Sometimes you get a new,
Yeah.
I don't know, CPU, GPU review,
Yeah.
and you have to swap 5 times a day the different motherboard.
Pois,
And
só
all
precisa
have to
tirar
swap.
a borda que vai ficar por cima, não é?
Yeah.
Para fazer testes,
So,
porque muitos dos componentes já estão na parte de baixo. Isso é fantástico.
From like this as opposed to network attached storage or something?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
currently, I'm just using different USB sticks,
Yeah.
and then I
Got
found this is just.
What a pain in the ass. Okay. I see why you did this. There are other ways, just so you know.
Oh,
but I see why you can pixie boot. But I understand though.
Yeah.
How about what's going on over here?
Quem faz
Yeah, so you
reparações
can also
ou
add
quem
to
faz
SATA SSDs,
benchmarks,
But
é
you would just
interessante.
usually have to plug them over
Ou reviews das boards, por
Right.
exemplo.
into your motherboard. So this is not going over USB, obviously.
Okay. Yeah.
But that at least that's why I wanted to have it. So if I have my Steam game library on there, which is like now I don't know like over a terabyte
Yeah.
of all the games,
Yeah.
you know, then I just have a SATA SSD on here, which its main reason is because it's cheap,
Yeah.
and that's why I would have this on here, and then everything always present.
How about switches? There's a couple switches
Yeah.
on here. So what do those do?
So we have
see
yeah
three?
we have different zones. So we have a 3 fan and 1 pump zone,
Okay.
and each one is fused.
Eu só
off
tinha
those,
visto
I saw
the
that.
tiny fuse. You can either choose from 100% fan speed, 50%, or EXT, which is
controlar as
external.
ventoinhas.
And the external mode draws from the external fan connector. So you could plug this into your CPU
Connector.
connector on the
Yep.
motherboard, right? And then everything that would be set to EXT would be connected to this.
Got it.
Same thing for the pump zone, except for the pump having like less connectors, but it's also 3 amps. So you would have basically here have 3 amps for this zone, while you also have 3 amps for the pump zone.
Right.
There's probing points. So either you could use it for probing, but I personally want to
Yeah.
use it as a power supply. So if I have
É, já
any
mais
external
para,
device I
para
want
malta.
to hook up to my PSU,
Faz
I can just solder
overclockings,
all
fazer os
wires to it.
probes.
And
Okay.
yeah, you power everything through 1 6-pin. And this also gives power to those 2 USB Type-Cs.
Yeah.
Não sei se ele vai perguntar o preço.
Or I
Oh,
have,
well.
for example, I have a thermometer I'm using for tracking my water temperature.
Yeah.
And that one is powered over USB-C. That's why I needed this.
Okay.
And
Cool.
that's why it
What's
was added.
price and release date?
Vai.
It's going to be about €200. But it's not only this. It's in the end, it also
Ah,
comes with
200 euros,
Oh,
vem
okay.
com aquilo,
Bunch of
vem
other,
com as
aluminium
pernas.
So
parts.
you don't like test bench platforms because they're big and they get kind of in the way.
Yeah.
So you made this, which is small, and
Yeah.
then you made these, which bolt to it, and turn it into a test bench platform that's big and in the way.
Yeah, exactly. But the thing is,
Yeah, exactly.
it's modular, so I will use it like this.
So this is you doing the people a favor. But if it were up to you, you would only use it like that.
No, this is me as the bauer, and this is Thermal Grizzly. You know, it's like me doing something, and then somebody said,
then
but
you
we actually
productized it.
have to sell it probably.
Right.
So we added this part. Yeah.
Got it. Okay, I think I understand. Cool. So then, before we jump over to the block detail with Joe,
Mas eu acho que a outra parte com as pernas tem sentido, que é por causa das fontes, por exemplo.
Our beautiful Astral water block. For
Este é o bloco, dos blocos, que é o tal que apareceu há bocado.
CPU block.
let's
Acho que o bloco
we'll
está
go quick and
fantástico.
get into the water block detail. All right. So now I am joined by Joe Roby from Thermal Grizzly these days.
Yep.
So we've talked before. You were at a different company at the time, and now you're doing engineering for Thermal Grizzly. We were talking a little bit about manufacturing difficulties, things like that. So what is special about how this is made?
Yeah, so it's a huge process actually. It's first machined from one side, and they're machined in a block of 4.
Eu
And
acho que a dificuldade das
together and pull the whole plate
gráficas
flips,
destes
and
coolers
it's
na série
located
5
by the
o
offcuts
Libor
when it goes
falou
back down,
que
and the
nos
opposite
vídeos atrás.
Okay.
so then we get what is essentially a blank part, and everything
bocado
is machined
complicado.
finish on. We glass blast the
Aliás,
inside,
na altura ele até estava
but
com
that also
ideias.
means we would glass blast.
Aliás,
all the
estava com as
contact patches
dúvidas
if
se
people want
seriam
to be
mesmo
a
avançar ou
product or
não.
a finish.
Right.
So then it goes back onto a machine, and they all get faced off. So then we have a flawless finish with no machining marks on all of the non-contact areas and the contact patches.
So basically, on the backside, after you blast this,
Yep.
so it is you're not like masking these off. It's hitting the
Yeah,
contact patches.
Yeah, so these would be left higher, like 0.2 millimeters higher.
Yeah.
Até
They
custará
get blasted,
bloco
and then
destes.
these get mounted piece by piece, and
Essa
they
é
get, and they
cara.
get faced off,
Okay.
and all the inside stuff gets cut.
Na Puma
Machine
5090
again, because we need to put it up on its end and make the parts for the
deve
time.
haver crise, digo eu.
So it gets flipped 3 times in the.
Yeah, like 3 setups, and the first 2 there's a plate of 4 pieces.
So what's the manufacturing time like on something like that?
For all of those steps altogether, it's about 2 hours.
Is that just for this piece, basically?
Yeah, just for the one piece.
2 horas para fazer o
Not
bloco.
counting that, and that also has 4
Não
setups.
acho
Okay.
que seja caro.
So,
Que caro.
What about? I mean, like, can you give me some appreciation for what the time really means? I guess because if you were gonna make a really simple, cheap or cheaper, relatively speaking, block, that's kind of like as you know, like this will do the job, basic.
Yeah.
What's the time on something like that look like?
I mean, we could make compromises to a point that people wouldn't be happy with the product.
Right. That's what I'm going for.
But it would still be a valid piece of engineering. You could just have an aluminium heatsink for all the VRM and the VRAM.
Yeah.
It's not a big heat density, and you could get away with having this as the only copper part, this big,
Yeah.
you know, and the cost of this is a fraction of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. What is the real cost or the challenge come from with this? Because we were talking about like the microfin spacing.
Yeah.
And so I guess first background information.
Esta
what's the
peça está
spacing of these?
muito.
So this is 0.2, 0.2.
Okay.
So the slot is 0.2, and the fin that's left behind is 0.2.
Okay. I mean, as you push them closer together, what are some of the challenges you run into?
So just being able to saw it is a challenge because every time you bring the saw in, it tries to bend the others away.
Yeah.
And as they become thinner, they become weaker. The tool becomes weaker, and everything becomes very difficult. And
Yields go down, I guess.
yeah, yield goes down, but the tool wear increases exponentially.
Okay.
The price of the tool also increases exponentially.
Because you're replacing it, or because it's a special tool.
I mean, to get a tool made that
Yeah.
thin, and they also have problems even just shipping the tool because it's so thin.
Okay. Cool. That's pretty cool.
Pergunta lá
So
para
going
isso.
back to like product level, I mean, is there anything special in terms of thermal design, cooling flow, anything like that you want to go over?
So the main thing we try to do when we make the coolant path is to occupy as much of the space as possible. Even though we have the O-ring between everything to seal off the dead areas where there's no flow,
Right.
we still want to reduce the dead area. So visually, there's a lot of coolant, and it looks really
O
neat.
vídeo que o
But
Libor na
if it
altura
would be all
fez,
square, there'd be lots of places
pré-teste,
to get trapped.
fazia uma diferença bem
Doesn't look
grande.
good. It can lead to
Termos
problems
de
with the placing if
arrefecimento.
there's air inside, and it hurts performance a lot. So it's just coming up with something to get as much coolant through as you can,
Right.
and keeping the air out and not letting it accumulate in the block.
Do you happen to know what the price is going to be yet?
Alto.
For the
For the
GPU,
whole
for the
block,
GPU
yeah.
block, the whole thing's going to be 500 euros.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
500
then how
euros.
about, we didn't talk about this at all yet. So this comes with it, right?
Yeah.
So what's the deal with this?
So it started as a piece of packaging because we wanted to ship the block assembled with the backplate on the block.
E das
And
mais
if you
caras
just screw it
que vi.
together without the card in there, then you bend all the backplate.
Yeah.
And the best thing to put in would be a PCB. So we're like, okay, then
Just do a
We
PCB.
could probably get a PCB.
Mas para uma
and then the first
5090,
one, we can
não
print
é?
instructions on it.
Ainda há
Credits.
3.000
And the
euros por uma
credits.
gráfica.
So-
Can we just get a close up on? So I don't know how many people in our audience know this. I think Roman's audience is pretty familiar, but there's actually someone behind the curtain,
Yes.
and
The overlords of Thermal Grizzly.
right, the supervisors. And we'll leave you to go to Roman's channel if you want some of that.
Yeah, so when me and Roman disagree,
Yeah.
it's settled by Shika Matita.
Well, but what if they disagree? There's only two. You need a third one for a tiebreaker.
They've always had a consensus so far.
Okay. How about, so one of the last things you guys mentioned to me with this is being able to put all the screws back in place with the air cooler.
Yeah. So like after we decided, okay, we'll have a board, then I was like, we can add a Goldfinger to it,
Uh-huh.
and then you can actually just take the block out of the box and install it, so you
Yeah,
can use it to
yeah,
build your
yeah,
whole loop
yeah.
without having a graphics card and
Right.
without spending.
Pelo
an hour or two
módulo
to
de
install
água.
Yeah.
And then when you do that, you can put this back in your air cooler and keep all the screws together and
Organized.
put the air cooler in an old motherboard or
Yeah.
something.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
The one thing that jumped out to me was the glass, using actual glass.
Yep.
What else, on here do you want to cover?
So it's a very similar construction to the GPU block, where we have one.
Este é o bloco
piece.
para
You
a
can see on this one,
CPU.
It's not plated. It's a big brass piece.
Yeah.
And that brass body has all of the threads in it, so it's pretty indestructible. And the flow routing and the way the jet plate's constructed is that it's integrated into that brass piece. So there's less parts than usual.
São
And
peças
Perfectly
espetaculares
matches what we
de
did with this.
engenharia.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool. Last thing I'll throw out there is so on the fittings, is there anything particularly unique you want to talk about for the design?
Well, particularly uniquely, you can assemble them into a giant cube.
What can I, if as a consumer, if I wanted to replicate this, how many fittings do I have to buy?
Well, 27.
Okay.
Yeah.
How much does this cube cost retail? 27 times.
27 times about 12 if you used all the rotaries to
Okay.
make it. Yeah.
All right. Okay. So a couple $100.
Yeah. $300-400 cube. Yeah.
Can you please make this and actually have it function to where it routes the water around in some way? And can you
Oh,
do
the wa-
3D water routing?
3D water routing
Yeah.
and Rubik's cube. Yeah.
Yeah, and Rubik's
And
Cube.
Rubik's.
It needs to spin at the same time.
Okay, so the objective is to get all the coolant through the whole thing
Yeah.
and out the other side.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll try.
Okay. That is COMPUTEX 2026. You heard it here first. I
Vamos
have
ver.
all of Roman's money,
Mas vai ser.
but I'm making Joe's job.
Mas vai custar uma pipa de massa,
Joe,
se
thank you
for
for
isso.
playing. And Roman, thank you as well. And we will see you all next time.
Ele a controlar. Pronto, este então foi o primeiro vídeo, ok? Agora vamos aqui aos nossos amigos do Warzone Unbox, também com a Thermal Grizzly. Eu não sei se ele vai falar a mesma coisa.
A lot about this
É lá diretamente na COMPUTEX, aqui vamos ver
a lot of new products, a lot of new information. So I was like, Joe, can you come and help me out with all of this?
aquela montagem
Our
do
COMPUTEX
teste.
coverage is brought to you by
Certo.
MSI's excellent QD OLED gaming monitors, offering perfect blacks, infinite.
Ok.
So
Vejam depois o vídeo do
his kind of dream
do
bench
Warzone
table,
Unbox.
because he likes things
Okay.
very simple and generally just uses a PCB with standoffs. And then he was thinking, like,
Acho que fica
together with
interessante.
Demo,
Fica
what if the
interessante.
PCB does a lot more
Não
useful
tenho
things?
dúvida.
So there's incorporated essentially a USB input, a fan header input from the CPU, an RGB input, and a 6-pin PCIe power input. And with those 4 inputs, it has RGB in the base, that's the simplest thing. There are 4 fan zones that can be used to configure all of the fans. One of them is dedicated to pumps that has 3 amp outputs. All the
Olha,
other
ganhou o
ones are
prémio
1 amp.
Best of COMPUTEX.
And they all come
Olha,
with a little
sim,
toggle
senhora.
switch. So you can either take the CPU PWM or you can override with 50 and 100% values.
Coisa simples, não é?
Then
Mas que
the data input from USB gets split between 4 SD card
vamos passar esta parte mais à frente
And
porque
for
o Dibala já
vehicles which
apresentou. Eu
are
gostava era de
powered,
ter
so
visto
you can
assim.
charge with
Lá.
these or run like high
Muito interessante. Aliás, gostava de ver até ter um PC
and also when you might be comparing two
montado aqui.
platforms that
Gostava de ver.
user layer and there's an in the base for a power supply.
Okay, yep.
Yeah.
So this is really up to their game. Only gotten worse. So
Este é o
with
tal.
the way it works and how Nvidia's implemented
Aqui
it,
eles já
any
têm
safeguards
vários.
that it did have,
Ok.
they seem to keep removing, and so
Portanto, quer dizer que já tem
Platforms with
várias.
backplate, one like
Estes aqui
around
acho
the
que ele
connector.
já os tinha.
And yeah,
Que é os mais
If you're not
simples.
happy with sort
Os
of
primeiros,
stuff like
aliás, a
that,
aparecer.
there's USB-C, but it's not necessary.
Vamos passar para também para a frente porque
So
já
the
vimos
wider you
isto.
can
yep, that would stop him from destroying the
stop it,
computer.
yeah.
Ok.
Make it bigger and bulkier, which It clearly has, but I think that's
Só
still
não gosto
fine.
é como ele está a falar. Acho que é muito grande.
That's going to be still pretty small hanging off an RTX 5090 graphics card. D-lidded CPUs, tell us a bit about those.
Isto já foi, já falei aqui uns tempos atrás, a Thermal Grizzly vendia PCs já com o delete feito, mas com garantia dada por eles 2 anos. Ou seja, como fazemos delete, que é arrancar a parte de cima, talvez, tira isto fora.
First of all, have to invest in the de-lidding tools to do it. And
Pois, e
void
temos que
your
comprar
warranty
isto, não é óbvio.
with AMD.
Ok.
But if you guys do it,
Comprando o kit já feito, é a garantia dada pela Thermal
warranty you're
Grizzly, é
providing is the
espetacular.
Thermal Grizzly warranty for that de-lidded product. It's not an AMD warranty. So,
Exactly, yeah.
so that's a big deal.
Portanto, quem gostar disso já sabe, acho que compensa. Claro que sai um bocadinho mais caro,
That's a pretty hot item.
mas vocês ficam com um produto com garantia, ao contrário de se vocês fizerem o vosso delete, vocês perdem automaticamente a garantia do processador, porque se com o processador a variar, seja a versão Intel, seja a versão AMD, o fabricante não vos dá.
To then run with the custom loop block.
Sure. Yep. All right. Interesting.
Peças para fazer delete, é isto que aqui
These on
está.
the channel before, and we've looked at them at previous shows. The Duranauts, obviously the new.
As pastas térmicas que eles têm muita, do melhor que há que no momento. Claro que é cara, mas isto é do melhor que há, Thermal Grizzly. Okay?
Thermal paste, which we're actually advertising here at
Tem vários
COMPUTEX.
tipos.
So we are very familiar with that one. But some stuff going on over here. Should we move around to the end here? Can I pick that up a little bit?
Yeah, sure. It's just a cable in it.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
Este é o tal kit.
That's up there with the heaviest 5090 I've picked up. I'm scared putting that down. So yeah,
It's very slightly lighter than the air cooler.
it is,
But
isn't
not
it?
much.
Of the Astral.
Yeah, of the Astro.
Yeah, I suppose the Astral just being so much physically larger, there's more of it to grab, and because it's a giant brick, you expect it to be heavy, but this being so compact, yeah, surprisingly heavy, and that's obviously large.
As 500 euros, um
Again,
bocado,
and then pads you
para
get from the front side.
o pesado, para o bolso, mas para quem tem 3.000 euros com uma grade.
A bit of PCB, what's going on with this?
So this is essentially a totally blank empty PCB.
Esta é aquela
The GPU,
conversa que eles falaram no outro lado, também não interessa.
2 rotaries, a 90 and a T.
Estas são as peças que se depois usam nas montagens
Together they
dos,
can be combined into
dos sistemas de
lots of
água,
other traditional types of
só que
fittings.
são de melhor qualidade.
So
Não é?
the 90 degree actually has no base at all. You install it with an 8mm hex key,
Okay.
and it's free to rotate about that, even without the base. And then you can extend it to be, let's say, the size of a traditional 90 degree fitting.
Yep.
You can make it smaller with just a 7mm extender, or you can make it bigger.
Okay.
And you can also, because it's so small, screw them multiple together.
Pads
So here we can see
para colocar também
directly next
nas
to each
placas
other, and you
gráficas
get
e
2 axes of rotation.
discos M2.
And also with an extender between, so these have an offset of 28mm.
And so if you were to change the system configuration, you could essentially take these apart and reconfigure them without having to throw them away and buy different connectors.
Yeah,
So it's a very, I guess, modular type system.
exactly. Yeah, we wanted to make each component as small and simple as it can be. So, you know, you take 190 like this and you can use it in any position you would want, a small one or a big one. And it's quite practical just to have lots of them then. Yeah.
And you can also do that.
You can build a cube because they're not just modular in one axis, like in height, but also in the width to the face as well.
Yep.
So both directions is 10.5
É,
meters.
cresce.
And you can-
Devem ter dito muita coisa,
It would have to
devem.
be screwed through here to connect
No
them all
discordo.
together, is that right?
There's no
Oh.
special piece in there. They're all standard pieces.
Okay.
It's just like if you start with one T and put another T on that and
Yeah, yeah.
another T on that.
I can sort of feel
Toda a
it
gente
wiggling, but
embarcou
that's
no
interesting. How
cubo.
much would this be worth?
That's about a 400 euro cube.
All right, I'm going to put that down.
É aquele cubozinho,
don't roll
400,
Oh, and just
400 euros.
lastly, availability
Cada
of all of this stuff.
cada coisinha daqueles é caro. não é?
So the first block that will become available is for the 5090 Astral, and that will be during July. Probably the next block to follow that will be the Deltamate CPU block, and then more graphics card blocks.
Okay,
And the fitting should be along before the end of the year.
excellent.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for that. It made my job much easier. Hopefully you guys enjoyed our coverage of Thermal Grizzly. Live Neo memory in our
Portanto, aqui está. E agora vamos para o terceiro vídeo, que é do Kit Guru, que eles também vai lá entrevistar os nossos amigos. Ok.
Kit Guru is with Thermal Grizzly at
Vamos ver
COMPUTEX
o que é que ele vai focar.
2025. It's a very small booth. They have quite a few products to look at. It's also quite busy. So we're going to just dive in and see what we can look at.
É kit pequeno, mas tem muita gente realmente interessada.
Thermal Grizzly has a PC, and I use the words in the loosest possible sense to demonstrate their key products. So the CPU block, which we have an example of here, and you can see it has this black cover. However, the black cover on the built PC has been removed. So you're seeing the bare CPU block. This is their Deltamate Micro Pro 2 for socket AM5, i.e. AMD. That's coming later this year, going to be priced around £300, euros, don't know about dollars. And I hold it in my hand and Rosie can have a look. As you can see, it is a conventional CPU block. Actually weighs quite a lot. Looks absolutely lovely. Thermal Grizzly will be making a version of this for Intel, much to my surprise. There is still demand for Intel cooling.
Só que para Intel não sei.
The pump reservoir, which I thought was by watercool.de, actually was made by Roman himself, who is De Bauer. So that's an in-house weekend project because he was a bit bored and wanted to work with some glass. If we go around the side to the Deltamate ROG Astral RTX.
Este é o cooler de há bocado, que vimos também, não vale a pena perdermos tempo.
Into making this block. The radiator and fan similarly, but apparently they're working on radiator and fan models. Who knew? Also here, we have the WireView
Está
Pro.
coisito. Este é o mais corrente.
Shall we? We have the original WireView Pro there, so it's an interface on your 12-volt high-power
Portanto, este é o mais usado. Mostra ali as voltagens.
Next to that, we have the WireView Pro
E as temperaturas também. E este acho que é o que vai ser agora o próximo.
Graphics card, your power supply goes there, but you will see there are other connectors. They are for data logging. You've got thermal input, you've also got a USB-C.
Eu vi tudo, Zaz. Vi tudo.
You've got the display, obviously, which tells you what
Tudo no Discord. Estou em cima de sempre do Discord.
It also has internal memory, so it can data log for a period of many months. And you'll note a tiddly fan. We saw this unit on Elmore's custom build at the G-Skill booth, and the idea is
A impressão digital ali é que não está nada boa.
to the plug connector and also to
Um
the
bocado para o
cable.
feio.
We noticed his was running around 45 degrees C. Without the active cooling, it will
Fica
get
bocado para o
distinctly
feio.
warmer. It's a bit of a shame this kind of thing is necessary, but it's good that someone's supplying these items. We go to the left. And we have a delidded processor. This is a Ryzen 9 9950X 3D. Thermal Grizzly supplies delidded processors, two models, Ryzen 7 9800X 3D and this Ryzen 9 9950X 3D. They'll charge you a premium of 120 euros for the Ryzen 7 and a premium of 200 euros for the Ryzen 9. You get the
Os tais processadores.
with your purchase, but they also send you full inspection photos before and after the delidding process, so you can be guaranteed that the process is in good order. Also, if you break it, they'll know you broke it. Of course, when we go to the left,
Deixa-me só.
this means that you don't
Deixa-me
need
só
to
ver
buy
aqui uma
a
coisa.
delid diamate heater, and furthermore, go to the left again, you don't need to buy the delid
Deixa-me ver só aqui uma coisa. Que é o meu programazinho de chat. Penso que não está a trabalhar bem. Tá? Deixa eu só ver aqui porque é que não me está a aparecer. Ok, já está. Já está a funcionar bem. É para controlar todos os chats que tenho, não há hipótese. É um programa que faz isso.
mate. So actually buying a delidded processor from Thermal Grizzly saves you money. We come to this Rubik's Cube. It's not really a Rubik's Cube, it's fittings. Lots of fittings all plugged together by Joe himself. He said 27 of them. They look like plastic, they're
Acho que
actually
teve
metal.
sucesso. Este cubo teve sucesso.
Very weighty. They
Teve
look absolutely
sucesso.
gorgeous. They seem very clever until James has got his hands on a batch of them. I'm not going to offer a review, but there is a card of a load of options.
Passar aqui para a frente, isto também vimos. Este
Move
aqui
across a whole load of thermal.
são as pastas térmicas. Para a Thermal Grizzly realmente dá cartas nisto. Não é a mais barata, pá, mas é muito boa.
Compounds, all sold at retail, but also sold to OEMs. On the left, Cryonautic Stream is for people doing liquid helium cooling. Next to that, we have Cryonaut, which is for liquid nitrogen. We move across. Duranaut is old school for air cooling and water cooling. Hydronaut, similarly, slightly more sophisticated. We go to the right, we get to the interesting stuff in my view. Phase sheet. You slap on a piece of this material, it sorts itself out. You haven't got to apply it as such, you just
Acho
stick
que
it
este
on.
aqui vai ser muito usado agora.
Right,
É
is
tipo
funny stuff. This is
uma
essentially
película.
a sheet of liquid metal. You can see there's a kind of oval patch in the center. That's a drop of liquid silicon that's been used just to apply the sheet to the block. And to the right, we have old school Conductonaut, which is liquid metal. The thing about CryoSheet is it acts like liquid metal. We know about the basic, advanced and pro.
Esses pads também são
Thickness of
muito
minus pad and
interessantes.
how hard you want it to work, but high compression is different. Up to 5 mil in thickness, but it can squidge down to 1 mil. We have a spec just down the bottom, rather a sizing sheet.
Este é muito
So you can
interessante
snap on a
realmente.
good chunky piece of high compression.
Porque às vezes o problema da malta é que não sabe a espessura dos pads.
When you apply it,
E
and I
dá
like the idea of
problemas.
that. However, if you're really super lazy, putty. We see here splodges of putty, and the color tells you what they are. Pink for basic, pale blue for advanced, gray for pro. And here we have tiddly pots of putty. Putty does everything. The only
muita
problem with
coisa.
putty is it causes mess. It works incredibly well. You slap it on, you've got a lot of mess to clean off. Particularly, you can imagine some of this noshing between these components here in the gaps. An absolute swine. At the end, we have some accessories. Would you believe there are
Acessórios.
2 different spatulas for thermal compounds? This TG spatula demonstrates one, just to show I can hold it.
Esta é a básica.
Is just for conventional spreading out your thermal compound. And yes, you
Convencional.
can indeed use a credit card, no problem. The Pro is for, what would be the word? Stiffer thermal compounds, when you really need to lever down on it. Basically, you'll
Até
break
isto
that,
é preciso.
you won't break that. If you do
De
break
coisas
this, you've
diferentes.
probably broken your graphics card or your processor anyway. And finally, Dare Bench Table.
Isto é
Turns out to
o
be a
table.
project that Roman decided to work on for the fun of it, and it's become an
Okay.
€200. So it's an interface
ganhou
card. It sits
o
under your motherboard. Obviously, the motherboard
Prémio
sits
da
on the stand.
COMPUTEX.
The idea is we have
Acho.
two. Like,
Gostava de ter
so you
visto
can control-
uma borda aqui em cima.
I like
Gostava.
5 with Thermal Grizzly.
Okay.
We're on TikTok, and do please check us out at kitguru.com.
Pronto, é o categoria, portanto sigam, vejam o vídeo também lá, não é? Deem também um cliquezinho, façam um seguimento do canal, que ele também merece. Tivemos o Gamers Nexus e o COMPUTEX, ok? Falando com o Debauer, com a Thermal Grizzly, e depois no próximo será outro tipo de eventos. Eu vou fazer assim sempre um resumo entre 2, 3, vai depender do tamanho do vídeo em si, ok? Para não ficar uma coisa muito grande, mas vai ser um resumo de coisas mais interessantes que tiveram na COMPUTEX, ok? Tirando a porcaria da apresentação da NVIDIA, que foi uma banhada, e a AMD não ficou muito atrás, mas a da NVIDIA